It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Dov and Eliezer here in your beautiful home in Beit Vegan. And you're going to hear the most incredible story, how a lost camera leads to a lasting friendship.
Shalom. In 1987, we were on a trip in Jerusalem, and on the way back home, we saw a camera on the fence, and there was no one at this area. Around us were thousands of people celebrating the Tabernacle festival, and there were many people, Jews and Christians, around. So I saw the camera. There was no one near it, and I saw that someone lost it. And it was very important for me to find out to whom this camera is belonging. It was an expensive camera. And we have a mitzvah that says that if you find something, you have to find a way to give it back to the owner and not to take it for yourself. So I thought, how can I give it to the owner? There was a camera, and at those times, 1987, the camera works with pulls. So I looked around, there was no sign on the camera, no name, no phone, nothing. So I thought to myself, how can I give it back? I decided to take it to develop the pictures that are in the camera, thinking that maybe that there I will find a clue to whom it is, to whom it belongs. So I went. It was on a
Friday.
It was on Friday morning. I went to develop and I told the people, the shop that is working to develop the pictures, that it's very emergency for me. So I asked him to make 2 copies of what is there in there. Then I found, when I looked at the pictures, I found that most of the pictures in this camera were of the Canadian delegation. So I understood these pictures were taken by someone who is fond of the Canadian delegation, and maybe he is one of the members. So I called up the municipality, and they didn't know to tell me where the Canadian delegation is, and I tried to find out in the Ministry of Tourism. At last I heard that the headquarters is in Binyanei Hauma in Jerusalem. So I went to the manager of this headquarters, and I told him, listen, I found a camera. Those pictures I developed from this camera. Ask the people who are coming to the convention, the man whose pictures are his, this is a sign that this is his camera, and let him call me up. It was Friday. Call me up to Shabbat or after Shabbat, because I am observing Shabbat and I am not answering on phones. So he took the pictures, and on Saturday night I got a call. It was after Shabbat, and a man spoke very excited that I found his camera. It was very important for him, emotionally too. So he asked me if I can come and bring him to meet him and give him the camera. So we went and met him at about 10 o'clock, and he was so excited. So he said, you have to go up to the delegations, they have to leave the place. I want them to see you. So I went with nearly on the bus, and they started to sing Hallelujah.
And he explained that this camera was very important to him because he bought it in Switzerland, and he bought it in Basel, and he stood with this camera on the balcony where Herzl was standing, and he said, "This is a Zionist camera, and I didn't want to lose it, and I'm so happy I got it back because it has an emotional significance to me."
So after it, for years we were in contact, and we spoke from time to time. Suddenly we lost contact because they moved to another place in Canada, and for many years we didn't hear about him. One day, your story.
Okay. And also what happened is that the numbers, the Israeli telephone numbers changed. They added an extra digit.
Yes, and he couldn't find us anymore.
Okay. So
Here's the disc.
So this is an amazing, something quite incredible that happened, that I have patients from the Christian Embassy, and I was invited to the Feast of Tabernacles where they have in Binyanei Homa, once a year they have an Israeli evening in Jerusalem in the main auditorium, the Binyanei Homa. And I went, and I always take my video camera, and we heard a talk by somebody from Uganda, somebody who, a priest who told us that the story, his face was covered with bandages, and explained that he came out of his church, and some youths, they actually threw acid on his face, and they burnt him so badly that he was rushed to hospital, and they couldn't treat him, so they sent him immediately to India on the first flight. And in India they said, "We can't treat, but there's a place in Israel, Kaplan, the hospital Kaplan," and they phoned Kaplan and they said, "We have a patient for you, but there's one problem. He doesn't have any money." And they said, "We'll take him anyway." And they brought him over to Israel, and he had many operations, and then they brought on the stage the surgeon that performed these life-saving operations, and the whole audience was crying. It was incredible. And then when he left, the next speaker came, and the next speaker was James Lamy, and he said, "Wow," he said, "after hearing such a presentation and delivery, how can I speak after this previous speaker?" But he said, "I'm going to tell you something different." He said, "I love Israel and I love the Jewish people." And he said, "And I'll tell you why." He said, "Many years ago," he started telling us the story. He said, "But before I start, I want to ask you in the audience, does anybody know of a Dov and Eliezer from Beit Vegan?" And I had my camera and I heard Beit Vegan, Azen. Sure. Anyway, I had videoed it, and then he starts telling us the story about how he had found...
He was at Parliament.
He was a member of the Parliament now, and how he had such admiration for Dov and Nili, who had found the camera. They wouldn't even accept. He wanted to pay them. He wanted to pay them even for developing the photos, and he said, "It's our greatest pleasure." But he said, you don't find people like this that will not only return the camera, but will return it with such eagerness that they went and they actually developed the spool with the photos, and they made duplicates, and they gave me and they didn't want 1 cent in return. He said, "There is no one like the Jewish people, and this is the reason why I love the Jewish people and I love Israel." When I heard the story, the whole audience, it was, we got up and we clapped. It was amazing. We had never heard such a story. So this was Erev, it was Simchas Torah, and I went to our shul in Beit Vegan, Beit Ariel, and I was so interested to find does anybody in our shul know I forgot the first name, but Azen. So the person in front of me, Moshe, I actually saw him, it was Simchat Torah, and he said, and I came to shul a bit late because this was Erev Simchat Torah, and I just come home and I got ready to go to shul, and I'd been to other shuls, but I went to our shul, and I asked him, Moshe, is there an Azen in Beit Vegan? And he said, there's 2 Azen families, and there's actually one in our shul. And we looked around, and it was already in the middle of the Simchas Torah, and he said he thinks that Dov has actually gone home, but he'll be here tomorrow morning. So I was extremely excited. The next morning I go to shul, and lo and behold, I'm introduced to Dov, who I'd known, I just didn't know all the names. And I say to Dov, I take him outside, and I say, Dov, did you find a camera? This was in 2012. Did you find a camera many years ago, and did you return it to its rightful owner? And Dov's face started to shine. He was so happy. And he said, straight after shul, you're coming to our home, and I'm going to show you something very special. And I'll never forget, it's like yesterday, we came home, we had a little kiddush in the beautiful home here in Beit Vegan, and then he took out it was as if new, the album with the pictures, and this was one of the pictures of the Canadian contingent at the Feast of Tabernacles when they had the Jerusalem March. And I told Dov, I know people from the Christian Embassy, Malcolm Heading, who was the head, he's South African, and let's get you back in contact. And we actually managed I phoned after the Chag, I phoned the Christian Embassy, and we got the numbers for the Member of Parliament, for James Lanny.
This was in 2012. So in this time, James Lonin was a member of the Canadian Parliament, and he was elected several times to be a member, and we were in connection, and he was the head of the committee for developing relations between Canada and Israel. From time to time he came to Israel and we met, and we used to invite him to our sukkah, and he came to the sukkah, and it was in באיזה שנה זה?
2019.
לא, איפה התמונה עם זה לא בסוכה. זה לא, זה במסעדה.
זה נראה ככה.
At 2019 they were in Jerusalem, and I borrowed for them especially a sculpture that is called Rows of Rockets, and it was done at Sapri.
This sculpture is made from rockets. It's a rose made from rockets. These are rockets that were, how do you say?
It's the shells.
The shells of rockets in the Gaza Strip. And there is a man there, an artist, who collects these shells, and they make them into roses because he believes...
They were fired from
Gaza.
That's the word I was looking for. The rockets were fired by the Hamas from the Gaza Strip on Israeli settlements. And this artist who lives in one of these settlements by the Gaza Strip, he believes in peace. So he decided to make from the shells of these rockets roses, to say that one day there will be peace between the Arabs and the Jews.
האדום זה הזקה אדומה.
צבע אדום.
צבע אדום.
Right.
זה באמצע.
Yes. What you can see here, this is the rose made from rockets, and in the middle there is a red point, and the red point is the siren red paint, red color that tells people to run to the shelters. But around it, you can see the rose that symbolizes the hope for peace.
באיזה שנה זה היה? שהרפר היה פה. We used to meet, and one of their journeys, we took them to the municipality, and there is a very special Pisiphas mosaic. And here you see James Lonin's wife showing on Jerusalem, the center of the world. And from this building, you can see Jerusalem all around. It's a very beautiful view there. And here they are on the balcony of the roof of the municipality. After years,
in 1914.
In 1914 they are?
Yes. In
1914?
Okay.
In 1914, Harper was here.
Yes.
And
the Prime Minister, the Canadian Prime Minister,
was here, and he gave a very special speech in the Knesset, in the Israeli Parliament, in honor of Israel, and he was one of the big friends of Israel. And after a while, when I met James with his wife in Jerusalem, we met them, I asked him to give Harper this, תחזיקי את זה? token, את קוראים לזה?
This pin, which is a token of Israeli friendship.
And I asked him to give it to Harper.
It's the Israeli flag.
Yes, it's the Israeli flag.
And a heart.
And a heart.
On the heart, to say, I love Israel.
So I told him that an ordinary citizen gives him this one in appreciation of his friendship to Israel. And it was, I was surprised and glad to receive an answer from the Minister of the Prime Minister of Canada, Mr. Harper, and this is the letter that he sent me. And he sent the letter because James Lonin, our friend now, was a very good friend of Harper, and he told him about the camera, and he told him also more about Israel and his Jewish history, because when I met James, I used to tell him about what happened to the Jewish history before the Shoah, and after the Shoah, and he told also Harper about it, and Harper was moved about what I told and about what he received, and this is a letter that he sent to me from
his office.
It's addressed from the Prime Minister's office in Ottawa to Dov and Eliezer in Beit Vegan.
Dear Mr. and Mrs. Eisen, December 19, 2014. I am pleased to have this opportunity to thank you for the lovely gifts which were given to me by Dr. James Loney, Member of Parliament for Nanaimo, Albany. It was very thoughtful of you to ensure my wife, Lorraine, and I each received one of these beautiful lapel pins. Your kindness is emblematic of the special relationship Canada and Israel share. Lorraine and I extend our best wishes for health and happiness in the coming year. Sincerely, Stephen Harper, Prime Minister of Canada.
Here is one of the visits of James Loney and his wife in our sukkah in Jerusalem. On one of those visits, we invited Dr. Glassman to meet James Loney. It's your story. לא, הוא יספר.
כן.
So I just want to also mention again, it was such an honor and a privilege to be invited to meet a member of parliament from Canada, somebody who was an extreme close friend of Stephen Harper, who actually influenced Stephen Harper for his tremendous love for Israel and the Jewish people.
Right.
And here, Dov managed to take a beautiful photograph of with James Lundy, myself, and with Dov, and I actually managed to donate this book to a similar book which I've given Dov called
You gave him.
I gave him a copy as well. Descend into the Abyss, the Shoah, a philatelic retelling, and this is written by Bruce Chadadith. It tells the whole story of the Shoah and the rebirth of the state of Israel. And he was moved to tears when he received this, because it's actual original material, original letters and postcards depicting one of the darkest eras in Jewish history and the lightest, one of the brightest eras with this establishment of the state of Israel. And it was such an honor to be invited to your sukkah and to tell him the story. And I just want to mention as well that this story about the camera, Dov, that you and Nelly found, and that you really went just out of your way. Many people, if they would have found the camera, they would have, and it was a very expensive camera. And in those days, these cameras were a couple of $1,000s. It was a very expensive camera. Most people would have kept it, or they wouldn't have bothered to take out the spool, and they would have just said, there's no one around. But you went far beyond. You did the most amazing, you did such a big mitzvah, but you did the right thing. And what you did, in a way, it changed the relationship between the two countries, because it made James Lundy so pro-Israel, so pro-Jewish, meeting people that, such righteous people, and it really changed. You touched his life in such a way that it really it instilled with him this tremendous love that he has for Israel and the Jewish people. Yeah. So with this story, I actually wanted it to be published because I thought it was incredible.
Definitely.
And I gave it to, I mentioned it to different newspapers, but they said, no, they're not so keen. And then there's a religious newspaper called the Mishpacha, and the news editor is a very close patient of mine, but I told the Mishpacha the story, and he said I should tell them, and they came and they interviewed, and the story actually appeared in October 2012, The Last Word, The Lost Camera Leads to a Lasting Friendship, with a picture of James Lundy in the Mishpacha magazine. And then a few years later, Pesach Kron's daughter-in-law wrote in her book, The Sparks of Majesty, also she retold the story, and it was called A Developing Story, because of the developing camera.
Yeah.
It's amazing how a small deed build up big things. We are friends about 35 years, and what we got from this camera is, first of all, a friend in Canada who became a member of the parliament, who was the head of the Committee of Israel-Canada relationship. One of his visits, he came here, we stayed in a hotel, and there was the Israeli ambassador in Canada who came to visit James Lundy, and James Lundy said, I wanted you to meet someone who has a story. And he invited the diplomat, the ambassador of Israel to Canada, to meet me, and we spoke, and he appreciated, the ambassador appreciated very much how such a simple things, small things, can bring such big
friendship
and such big results. and we are in friendship up to today. And we got in some, first of all, we have the friendship with James Lonin, who is an important politician in Canada. And because of the camera, we got another friend, and this is Dr. Glassman. He found out, he was there, and he tried to find out who is this Eisen family, and he found us. And from 2012, we keep in connection with with Glassman family. They are living in the neighborhood. So we got we were paid for what we have done. We got friends, and we have a story that is worthwhile to tell it.
And for us on our side, we are so grateful, and really you both are not only remarkable, but you are both people that the whole world should try and emulate.
Wow.
Because see, by doing, it's not such a small deed what you did, but what you did, if only more people would do what you did, we would be living in a better world.
That's true.
So a little mitzvah,
yeah, can bring great results.
and it really did. And
Thank you.
Our friendship, we are so grateful.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so much.
I just want to thank you so much for just introducing us to such an amazing person, and we gained also tremendous friendships as well.
Great.
So the lost camera leads to lasting friendship,
Friendship.
and it's friendships.
Right.
Thank you so much.
So we did it.
And you should just only keep on smiling, not only for the camera, but for always for life.
Thank you very much.
As was noted, I spent almost a decade as Prime Minister of Canada, something for which I shall be eternally grateful to the Canadian people. I know there are a few here today. Talk to my wife. But I tell people that in that capacity, I spent meetings, a lot of time in meetings around the world. In fact, meetings among some of the most powerful people on earth, where my voice in defense of Israel was very often a lonely one. But I like to say it was a clear and consistent one. Our government had a policy. That policy was strongly supported by all of my cabinet and caucus. That was that our government's recognition of Israel's right to exist was unconditional. Our support of Israel's right to self-defense was unequivocal, and our refusal to single out Israel for attack and sanction was unwavering.
The Honourable James Lunny is a member of the Parliament of Canada. He's a member of the party of the Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, which has distinguished itself as Israel's closest friend in the world over recent years. Mr. Lunny.
Erev told to all. I just want to give you a quick Jerusalem March story, because tomorrow is the day of the Jerusalem March, and it was 1987, and I had an experience here in Jerusalem. Well, we had a large group that particular year. We had one particular lady who really stretched her faith to do the march. It was a physical stretch for her. She was lagging way behind, and I thought I had to stay with her. You know, the traffic is pretty tight up at times like that. We were to meet the bus at an appointed place. And by the time we got there, the bus was gone. Well, you know, the police made us go wherever the bus driver. She sat down on the wall to recover her strength before we could walk on to our hotel. It wasn't that far away. We weren't that far from what was the Hilton in those days, and it's Crown Plaza today. Well, in the process, left my camera on a little short on a wall. We got back to the hotel a few minutes later, and I realized my camera's gone. The people with me grabbed me and said, well, let's pray about it. So we prayed that God would bring back my camera. And the next morning we got on the bus, and I picked up the microphone. I said, hey, you guys believe God could bring back my camera? Well, some did and some didn't. And I want to tell you, there's a family here in Jerusalem. I wish they could be here tonight. They've been in before at the Israeli night, but I couldn't reach them. If any of you know Dov and Neely Eisen, they live in Beit Vegan. Tell them I'm telling the camera story.